Who won the transfer portal in this spring cycle? I think Oklahoma is one of the winning teams. Not the only winning team, but I think Oklahoma, when they added Dominic Williams, who has been a player talked about a lot in many different circles for a few different reasons, but when Oklahoma added him, that sent up, I think, a signal. Number one, because they got a really good player. If you don't know who that is, by the way, he's the defensive tackle from TCU. He's 6'2", 320. He's a 2-year starter for them. He's a really good player. LSU was in on him heavy. A lot of teams wanted him. Oklahoma ends up landing him. Okay, the reason I think that's big is, number one, you got a good player. Number two, like I said last show, and that clip got passed around Oklahoma circles and praised, but I meant it, is it signifies, it's symbolic. We're big into symbolism on this show. It is symbolic that Oklahoma gets where they are. Like everyone's talking about Texas, and I am too, and how tooled up Texas looks and how fortified their roster looks because they're coming to the SEC. Well, Oklahoma, they don't have as high an expectation coast to coast for their team this year as Texas does, which we'll talk about later in the show. But Oklahoma's not taking a back seat to anyone when it comes to aggressiveness and when it comes to exploring every possibility to fortify their roster as well. They just added 4 blue chippers. And then I go back before spring, and I added a guy like Deion Burks, for example, who lit it up at wide receiver in spring. But this is just post-spring. I think Oklahoma's a winner. Miami, unequivocally, they've been a winner throughout the entire transfer portal cycle. So you think about Miami on the heels of landing Cam Ward at quarterback. I told you when they landed him, I really thought they'd probably be the most aggressive team out of any team in the country in the post-spring portal window, and they were. They went and got Damian Martinez, the running back from Oregon State. Now, if they had just stopped there, given what else they have, and given some of those young guys maturing in that former freshman class, that would have been really big. But they went and got Simeon Barrow, the defensive lineman from Michigan State. They got the Hill kid, for that cornerback, and they also got Jalen Alderman at linebacker. So on all 3 levels of the defense, they leveled up. So Miami, I think, an absolute winner in the spring cycle in the portal. I don't have to go far up the road to find you the next winner. You know, I've been quietly beating the drum for Central Florida on the show. And I think maybe it will take until this fall for some people who tune out during the spring, people who believe in an offseason, to really realize what Gus Malzahn and his staff have done. They just added 9 kids in the spring portal window, not the total portal, just the spring portal window. They added Penny Boone. That's a 4-star running back, former All-MAC kid. Nigel Kelly was one of the crown jewels of Miami's recruiting class a couple of years ago. They add him. Ja'Cory Brown also came there from Miami, and that's important. I was down there talking to Malzahn not too long after they picked him up, and Malzahn was talking a lot about how successful he had been with Cam Newton. And no one thinks there's another Cam Newton out there. But he said, I got to get those styles at quarterback. So I've got KJ Jefferson coming in from Arkansas. He'll be their starter this year. But Ja'Cory Brown comes in and probably not ready to be your starter right now. But a year from now, we've seen what Malzahn does with those kinds of guys. And look, historically, let's just be real about it. Even going back to his time at Auburn, when Malzahn's had the most success at quarterback, it's been with a transfer. It's sometimes they weren't even quarterbacks that transferred, and he's taken. Nick Marshall was a DB at Georgia, and they went to the SEC championship with him, won it, I think, that year. So I get my years mixed up with Auburn. So UCF, they're not acting like every other Big 12 team. Colorado is in its own world, but outside of that, think about how the rest of the Big 12 goes about its business, and that doesn't mean one way is right and one way is wrong, but UCF, because of where they're parked and because of how unique their opportunity is, I said this before they came to a power conference. In this case, they're in the Big 12. If they could ever just get there, they'd be a destination. Then you get the portal, which I didn't even know was coming. You get the portal dropped in your lap as well. It's a really advantageous time to be at Central Florida. And then Oregon, of course, they didn't add huge quantity in numbers in the back half of the portal cycle, in this post-spring cycle, but they added Derek Harmon, the defensive lineman, yet another one from Michigan State, and they're just stacking depth now. And it's important twofold. Number one, because of the player they got. And number two, the teams that didn't get him, because Oregon was able to get him. This, by the way, along with Peyton Woodyard, the DB out of Alabama, that locks down the number 2 portal class, and they've got the number 3 recruiting class from this past cycle. So that's how they sort of slingshot themselves into the Big Ten. They're coming in there with, I think, as good a situation as I've seen Oregon ever have in terms of just defensive personnel in their front. It's there's a preview magazine version of good, and then there's a real world version of good. The preview magazine version is if everybody stays healthy, you can do like Clemson did that one year where they had those 4 guys, they hardly ever took them off the field. Like all of them were first or second rounders, and they ended up winning the national championship. Normally, it's not like that. Normally, you've got bumps, bruises, you got guys missing games. You just need to rotate because you don't have aliens like Clemson did on that team. Well, Oregon has the ability to do that. Now, they're not the only team, but normally when we're talking about teams like that, we're talking about SEC and we're talking about Big Ten. Oregon is Big Ten now, and I think they possess the ability to do that.